to record properly now. Brilliant stuff. I'll pass back over to Leslie as chair.
Okay, thanks, George. Thanks, everyone, for your quick introductions.
Did we miss Gemma?
Oh, sorry, Gemma. Sorry, I thought I'd gone through the whole list. My apologies. Gemma, as I said, my list has moved quite a lot.
Have done me.
Yeah.
Oh, I have done you. Oh,
Yeah.
we haven't missed anyone. We haven't missed anyone.
Good.
No? All good. Thank you. Sorry, guys.
So one of the other things that we needed to talk to you about tonight was obviously Greenhavens Network itself needs quite a bit of running. We need at the moment someone to help run our Facebook. So if anybody's interested in another hat, please shout if you fancy doing some sort of moderator activity on the Facebook page. I think that's all we need, isn't it, at the moment, Karen? Pam, have you got any financial update for us very quickly before we
so far this financial year, we've actually only spent £64.25 on website. We currently got ring fence money of £4,500 for 3 grants that have come in. Do you want me to describe the grants?
No, no need.
All right. So the main focus is the training that we need to take up.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, carry on. Sorry.
No, so with the training hat, I think we've got this CAT scanning. I haven't had the invoice, so I don't know how much money is left in the pot. But it was looking at the first aid and what the first aid requirements are.
Yeah.
It was nearly £1,000 for three people from 3 different groups. So it is a lot of money, which is why we're pleased that he's offered to do it for free in a year's time, because he thought we were all amazing, that we're all doing all this stuff for free. So, good news.
No, that's good. I think also, Karen, you're going to send out an email quite soon, aren't you, to see who wants first aid training within their groups, so that we can work out how much money we've got left and what we can spend on. So look out for that in your inboxes. Is there anything else, Karen, that we need to update everyone on?
Just with the training, there will be, obviously when we wrote the funding bid, as many of you all know, we put in that we were supermen and that we were going to deliver lots of things. So obviously now we've got to drill that down, and it's what the groups want. So some of that was very much health and safety to get you all up to speed so that you're working out there safely. But then also we wanted to do some nice things, the more fluffy side of things, you know, like some bat identification course or some flora botanical courses or something like that. So what we really want is for people to come back to us and say, this is what we would like, this is what our group wants, or this is what our community street wants, because it's open to everybody that's members. And I'll send an email out to remind everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Karen. So I don't think we need, unless anybody's got any burning questions, I think we can hand over to Phil and his presentation. Anyone? I can't see any hands up. George, any hands up?
No hands up that I can see. I'm just trying to get Phil some permissions to show the presentation, but for some reason it won't let me do it, Phil, as you suggested, unless I give you the complete chair, no, complete host. So how would you like to do that? Oh no, you can pass it back to me, can't you? So that shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, if you're able to make me the host, then hopefully that means I can enable screen sharing.
Yeah, okay. If not, I can share it. I don't know how we want to do this.
You received the presentation earlier?
I've got the presentation, yeah, I've got it up here. I don't mind, whatever's easy for you and everyone else.
Well, if you're happy to be on hand to move through the slides, then it'd be, I'm happy with you sharing your screen, and then.
Okay, brilliant. I've got no issues with doing that. I'll get that up there then. Sorry about that.
Right. Okay, thanks for all yours in a minute.
Okay, well, thanks very much for having me, Greenhavens, and it's really interesting to hear about the range of organisations in the network and a bit about the geography of where you are as well. So as you might have heard in advance of the talk, I'm Phil. I'm here on behalf of Feedback, which is an environmental NGO. And since May 2017, I've been running the Gleaning Network in Sussex. And this talk is going to be in reference to, yeah, you can move on to the next slide, George, thanks. It's going to be a bit about feedback. I'm going to be talking about gleaning, its historical legacy, and its modern reincarnation, and a bit about what we as the Sussex Gleaning Network have been up to in 2020, and then I thought we could open it up to a discussion at the end. So do jump in at any point if you have any questions. Also, if there are any technical issues, if you can't hear me, or if something crops up with Zoom, then do feel free to butt in and I won't be offended. So next slide, please, George. Okay, so Feedback's kind of main objective as an environmental NGO focusing on food and sustainability comes from a recognition that we're not going to be able to solve the climate and ecological crisis without changing how food is produced and consumed. So that comes with something I'm sure you're all aware of, which is that food accounts for a good chunk of global greenhouse gas emissions. So the IPCC sort of estimates between 25% and 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions that can be attributed to the food system. And it's also a big driver of land use change, deforestation, and it's, you know, the big thing that Feedback has focused on for its quite short lifetime is that by preventing food waste, we can massively reduce these impacts. And the idea of the big win that would come about from reducing food at such a big level, reducing food waste at such a big level, would be to have some land sparing. So the overall geographical footprint of the agricultural system could be reduced, and we could allow for nature to regenerate on some of the land that's currently used for producing food. So next slide, please, George. Thank you. So at Feedback, we've kind of got two key goals that we use to sort of focus on in the medium term. We're by no means alone in these ambitions, but they relate to reducing agricultural's ecological footprint. And the first one is the Sustainable Development Goal, halving food waste from farm to fork by 2030. And that's on 2015 levels, I believe, from the Sustainable Development Goals. And the second one is in relation to livestock and dairy, and we'd like to see a halving of production and consumption of those food types by 2030. So next slide, please. With regard to food waste, the founder of our charity, who is actually from Sussex, Tristram Stewart, came up with this quite handy schema for making sense of food waste prevention and reduction as being the kind of principal intervention. And you will recognize this schema as a kind of reincarnation of the very kind of well drilled in adage of reduce, reuse and recycle. I mean, it's quite self-evident, the food waste pyramid, but I'll just talk through it as a sort of hierarchy of best use. So the best thing that can happen with food waste is that we avoid generating it in the first place. And that involves the private sector having better plans for avoiding overproduction or reusing or reprocessing and extending shelf life. So that's the kind of top level. And then in instances where edible food is unavoidably surplus, redistributing that to feed people in need would be the next best use for that food. And then following that, feeding livestock. So we have a campaign called The Pig Idea, which is geared towards catering waste and swill being fed to pigs. which has been illegal since the foot and mouth crisis. Unfortunately, because of the way soya is produced, livestock feed is a real driver of deforestation. So if food waste could fulfill some of that demand for soya, then we would see a reduction in the need for soy from the tropics, which would be a big win for sustainability. And then below that, we've got composting and renewable energy from anaerobic digestion. My colleague Martin last week published a report on anaerobic digestion, which is basically cautioning for it as a kind of silver bullet for use of food waste. Whilst it does have a place, the last few years there's been a big drive towards very large anaerobic digestion plants that are very hungry for organic matter, and actually you'll find some of these plants are having edible food put into them, which is not an optimal outcome, and in some cases even quite large tracts of land growing maize to feed these anaerobic digesters, which isn't great for the overall food system. And then obviously worst case scenario is landfill. So next slide, please, George. So what does feedback actually do as an organisation? So we work across a few different kind of leverage points or points of entry to society. We run campaigns, and that involves policy, advocacy, and kind of communications. Sorry, was someone
can everybody see the slides? I can't see any slides. Keith Blackburn speaking.
Hi, Keith. Let's make sure you can see it.
You should be fine. Is anyone else having any issues seeing it? No, Keith, have you on gallery view, or are you just on? Yeah, if you okay, try going on the. You got gallery view. There's another view, isn't there? Theatre view or something. It's called. No, it's in Teams. It's called. Are you on a phone or are you on a laptop?
I'm on an iPad.
iPad. That shouldn't cause any problems. I'm unsure as to why.
Oh well, don't worry. If nobody else is having a problem, I'll have to put up with it.
Without seeing it, Keith, it's a bit awkward. Sorry.
Yeah.
I can't.
Try and be as descriptive as possible.
Have a fiddle about. Have a play about.
I've got it now.
Oh, you got it now. Fantastic.
Okay.
I'm going to shut up then. Glad you got that now. I'll let you continue, Phil.
Okay, so more about what feedback does in the sort of broad areas of campaigning and lobbying and advocacy, and that would include having some campaigns. I mentioned the pig idea. We've got one in relation to big industrial livestock farming as well. And in the past, we've had campaigns running on food waste, and we're starting a campaign on anaerobic digestion as well. So that, I guess, is kind of communications and public-facing stuff. We also do some investigations and research to form the evidence base for those campaigns. We have pilots and projects in the community on the ground, so Gleaning would fall into that. Most of my work is within that space. And then events, and feedback was actually founded around an event in 2009 in Trafalgar Square. Our founder Tristram organised a feeding of the 5,000, where basically industry, campaigners, chefs, and politicians were brought together for this big meal. Huge amounts of surplus food was cooked up in the square and given out as a way to highlight the issue of food waste, and also to bring those people together to form a little bit of a catalyst really for action to take place. And from feeding the 5,000, feedback was sort of born out, and that meal was repeated in Trafalgar Square in 2011, and then went on to take place in over 100 cities around the world. So there was feeding the 5,000, Johannesburg, LA, Rome, lots of places, and the idea in each location was that it would bring together campaigners with the industry and policymakers, so there would be some sort of food waste movement galvanizing on the back of the event. No worries, Vicky. Thanks for joining all the same. Next slide, please, George. So to introduce our team in Sussex, it's myself and my role, Regional Programs Manager, Flavour Pilot Manager, it's sort of interchangeable. But as I said, I've been working for Feedback since May 2017. And recently I've been joined by Rosie, who is the Gleaning Coordinator. So I work 4 days a week, sometimes a bit less out of season. And Rosie is seasonal during the harvest months for 2 days a week. So that's our kind of scope and our roles. She's busy planning a apple glean on Friday in Wadhurst at the moment. So she's looking forward to that. Next slide, please, George.
It's literally just disappeared for some reason.
Okay.
Bear with us. I'll get it back up. I do apologise deeply.
I think we're about to jump back in time to gleaning as an ancient practice.
I'll have to open it back up. I do apologise.
It's all good.
There it is. There we go. Spot on. Please continue. Sorry. Can everyone see that?
It's not updated on my screen.
Oh, hang on. Let me stop share and I'll restart it. Hang on. My apologies.
All good.
That one. There we go. You see that? Should start popping up now.
Yep.
Spot on. There we go.
Still on the team.
If we could move on to the next.
Yeah, I haven't
slide,
moved it on yet, so I just have to get it back up. There you go. That's okay.
Okay, so gleaning has quite old roots. It's an ancient practice that was mentioned in the Old Testament. So Ruth the Gleaner, who's pictured in this painting, requested of, I think, the farmer called Bowers, but I have to admit I'm not that much of a biblical scholar. So I think the story basically is Ruth here asking permission to glean corn, and being granted permission, and there being a bit of sort of Old Testament ethics around farmers keeping behind some of their harvest for the least well off. So the idea being that a certain percentage or certain proportion of their harvest would be left for the rural food insecure to come and gather themselves after the main harvest. And this would have been something that I guess would happen in the Middle East, but might have very readily happened in other parts of the world during a time when, you know, food was in the food system would have looked very different, and food security would have been very different. Next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. And in the sort of more recent era, in the 18th and 19th century, gleaning persisted as well. There was an interesting piece at the Christmas edition of The Economist where a writer called Anne Rowe looked at some of the sources that mentioned gleaning in the 18th and 19th century, and she discovered some really interesting stuff about how farmers would ring a bell in the morning to say that people had permission to go out in the fields and glean, and then they'd ring it when they had to stop to ensure it was a level playing field. And it would actually represent quite a kind of substantial proportion of their income, maybe as much as 1/8 of a rural land worker might have derived their income from gleaning. So there's some legacy to it. There's some deep roots to it. But in the modern industrial food system, it looks very different. Gleaning now, it's in response to an agricultural system that overproduces and the environmental issues that come with that. So the activity now is about reducing food waste and reducing the amount of edible food waste on farms, and also telling that story whilst doing so. It's still about increasing food security for the least well off. That part has not changed. And we do that by delivering wholesale volumes of fresh, healthy produce on obviously a seasonal basis and a slightly sporadic, or at least I'd say inconsistent, because we can't forecast when we're going to have produce to deliver. So we do obviously give notice when we have a cleaning day arranged to the organisations we're going to supply, but we can't give them more than a week or two of heads up that the produce will be arriving. But gleaning is also an experience that participants can take part in, and it's outdoors, it's positive, it's fun, it's physical, and it connects people with where their food comes from. So it's a chance for people to get outside and enjoy being in nature and being on a beautiful farm, and that as an educational and kind of to some extent it's therapeutic, because often it's urban dwellers getting out into the countryside. But at the same time, it is graft. So there's some dopamine from the sense of achievement that you get from a big stack of harvested of gleaned produce that comes with that experience. So often gleaners at the end of the day, when they get home, they report being exhausted but elated at the same time. And yeah, I mean, the sort of summary for what it is now, we think of it as positive, purposeful, participatory, and practical. And as you see in this slide, this is a leek glean in Cookfield that we did last April. We often get a good turnout of volunteers, and we often get quite high yields of produce. So since 2012, Feedback has been gleaning across the country. We've run over 400 gleaning days, and they've mostly been in Sussex, Kent, Lancashire, and that area around Preston, and a little bit into Merseyside, but yeah, around the northwest, and in the east of England, in Lincolnshire as well, where we had East of England gleaning coordinator. So over that time, we've had 5,000 volunteers come, and we've gleaned over 560 tons of produce. As quite an intangible number, 560 tons. To try and put it in perspective, those leeks there, I think when we calculated their weight, they were about 500 kilos. They were about half a ton. But it really depends. Our haul does depend on, the weight of our haul does depend a lot on the crop we pick. If we pick apples, they're very heavy and quick to harvest. So we might end up with getting 2 or 3 or 4 tons of apples in a successful apple gleaning day. But then at the same time, if we're picking soft fruit, we might get 100 tons of blueberries, and 100 kilos of blueberries, and that'd be considered a very good haul. Anyway, we are weighing, that figure. Sorry, we'll jump back to the previous slide. Yes, thanks. That figure encompasses all different types of fruit and veg. Yeah, we've been hosted by over 60 farmers, many of them repeatedly, most of them repeatedly, in fact. Big part of that is trying to be as good to work with as possible for them, and minimizing their inconvenience. And we've donated this produce to quite a lot of different charities, with the principal partner being Fair Share, due to their ability to receive high volumes and distribute very quickly. Next slide, please, George. Thank you. So why do people come gleaning? Volunteers come with various motives in mind. A big one is because they're interested in food, and the prospect of being on a farm is an appealing one. Often, like I think many of the people on this call, they're keen to take action for the environment, so they have a concern for the environmental issues associated with food waste, and gleaning offers a chance to take action on that. The appeal of working in a team, and being in a group with a nice shared goal for a day is what brings some people. Many people are involved in their own communities in food support for people in food insecurity, and they might have received Glean produce and then thought, oh, that sounds like a nice idea. But I would say their principal motive comes from a place of social justice, where they want to support people in poverty, and this offers them an extra way to do that. And then quite simply, some people just enjoy a nice day out. And we're happy to cater for various motives and welcome them all along. Next slide, please, George. And what's in it for the growers? You might be wondering. Well, we give them the chance to redirect their surplus and avoid them having waste. Sometimes that is associated with a cost where they might have to pay for its removal, and they might be paying for that to go into an AD plant or into a composting facility. But also, I think farmers are often the last people that want to see waste come about, because they get a drive off feeding people. So if you offer them a way to redirect their otherwise wasted crop that they've already defined as unsellable, then that's something that they're content with. They're more content with that than it being wasted. So we provide as simpler an avenue as for them as possible for directing their unharvested food to local good causes. There are some environmental benefits because of the avoidance of food being wasted, and often farmers are very clued up about sustainability. Some of them are looking for ways to include the public, and this is one way to have visitors, and they enjoy the interaction of volunteers. And then some of them are motivated by having some publicity. Pick Your Own Farm that hosted us on a few occasions, they're aware that we are liable to plug their farm, and we also had a Country File TV crew one time join us, and that was actually really good publicity for the farmer, because it was early June and we were gleaning rhubarb, and his strawberries were just about to ripen. And Country File did a really good job of being like, we're in very beautiful Maynard's farm in Sussex, and the farmer was delighted with that. I wouldn't say that was why we were invited there. We've got a good relationship with that farmer, and he's great. So I don't think it was so much of a self-interested thing, but that was a potential benefit for them. So next slide, please. Thanks. In 2018, we got some funding from an organisation called WRAP, who you might have heard of, who do Waste Resource Action Plan. So they're a sort of semi-autonomous government agency who create a huge amount of resource for community groups taking action on waste, but also policy recommendations. And I mean, WRAP are very serious organisation. They produce a lot of great resources, and they do some great communication campaigns. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with them. They funded us to run a short program of training community groups across the country to run their own activities. And I think that came from a bit of a recognition within feedback that we could only have so many regional members of staff before it made sense for community groups themselves to take on gleaning. So as part of that project, we created a toolkit, which is up on our website, to provide a sort of how-to guide for anyone anywhere in the world who's interested in starting a gleaning group to read that and potentially start a group. We actually got some additional funding during COVID from the National Lottery to do some more training. So we've been running a series of webinars in August and early September, getting some additional gleaning groups set up as well. So the combination of this mostly 2019 WRAP project and also this year's lottery funded work, we've now trained over 30 groups, many of whom are up and running. Some of them will still need some additional advice and support. But essentially it's been a bit of a strategic move within feedback to decentralise gleaning. And there's a bit of an exception to that in terms of Sussex and Kent, which I'll come to. But in general, our approach now is to proliferate our what we've learned as much as possible, and to try and decentralize it and say to community groups around the country, if you live in a region where there's horticultural production, then this is a great activity that you can do regularly at quite low cost. So that's community-led gleaning, yeah. Next slide, please, George. I thought it's worth adding in here what gleaning isn't, in case it needs spelling out, because sometimes it can be imagined that food surplus at any level is the remedy for poverty. And I think it's very important to emphasize that food surplus and food poverty have very different underlying root causes. And whilst gleaning has, you know, social and environmental benefits in both those respects, it doesn't fundamentally address underlying issues of food injustice, much more than a emergency food provision via the likes of Fair Share. Don't get me wrong, I think those things are really, really important, and I would never advocate them not being provided. But I guess what I'm saying is that there are really important concerns associated with poverty, such as the benefit system, housing system, fair employment and fair wages, that are the kind of answers to resolving poverty in a way that emergency food provision doesn't address. So it's worth just me putting that out there. We can maybe talk about that later, because it sounded like some of you are involved in redistribution, and I'm really supportive of those important projects that are going on. Gleaning isn't going to entirely eradicate food waste, because we're not able to harvest every single crop. I think there will always be a certain degree of gluts, there will always be some level of food waste, but we are doing our best to harvest where we can when we hear about a crop. It's also worth mentioning that it doesn't always represent a win for the grower. Some of you might have thought on that slide, what's in it, what can we offer for the growers? Well, actually, when the margins are quite tight and farm gate prices are quite low for producers, them donating some of their edible produce is a hit for them. And we do have to really recognise that, because they do work really, really hard to produce food and don't always get an ample return. And farming is a livelihood that does have precarious income due to unexpected things that can occur, and the nature of growing food is that it's an unreliable business. So we are a last resort for farmers, and we would always say that we only want to come gleaning if it's unsellable. We're only in it for the food waste. I mean, there's been instances where we've been on standby for a crop and we've put effort into to mobilizing for a potential glean, and farmers have found a buyer for it, and that's a really good outcome, because it increases the stability and sustainability of their business. And a lot of farmers do really struggle on tight margins. So we have to be sensitive as gleaners to that. Sometimes gleaning is criticised for being poor quality food for people that are only deserving of poor quality food, and actually it's really not the case. Gleaning, the produce that we gather is high quality, it's fresh, it's nutritious, it's picked on the day and delivered to organisations like Fair Share on the same day, because we don't have any storage facilities, so it's straight from the farm. We have quality control standards whereby we say to volunteers, if you want to do some processing with the damaged stuff, brilliant. If volunteers don't take that home, I store it up and I put it out on Oleo, and it goes in seconds in Brighton. People love random wonky, or well, it's not, we're not discriminating here on size, shape or color. It tends to be damaged or bruised or stuff that won't keep. So basically the quality control on the gleaning day, which is obviously going to be a challenge with volunteers, but something we are really committed to, ensures that the quality of the produce that we donate is good. And that's really important, because we don't actually want people, sorry, Joe, I haven't quite finished with that previous slide.
All right.
Thank you. That's all right. So yeah, the thing there is really about the standard of what we're giving it, and we really want people that receive the food to have a sense of, wow, this is awesome, fresh Sussex produce, and be excited about eating it, rather than, oh, that looks a bit manky. What? And their instinct to immediately be that it's actually surplus food that's left over, and them not attach value to it. Because I think that if you're a recipient receiving food that you don't attach value to, then that's going to affect their self-esteem. Okay, I think I've laboured that point enough. It's also worth mentioning that it's not for everyone. You know, some people going to do farm work for a day and getting active is idea of hell. It's I mean, if you like working outdoors, then it's great fun. But I've had enough conversations with people to know that it's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's totally fine. Next slide, please, George. Thank you. So I thought I'd just delve in a little bit about why food waste happens at the farm level. So the thing that Gleaning offers that a lot of other food waste activity, I mean, there's so much brilliant stuff happening on food waste these days, but they happen at other stages in the food chain. So working with producers at the field level is pretty unique to Gleaning. A lot of other food waste distributors work with farms when they've already packed and stuff's already, you know, in barns and warehouses and in distribution. But the farm level, field level nature of what we do is quite specific to Gleaning, and that means that we have some insights into why food waste happens at that level. And there are various drivers of this. A big one is still the size, shape and colour of the produce. I'm sure many of you will have noticed that some supermarkets have introduced ranges of different quality, sort of different graded produce, and that's really a welcome move. There's also new delivery schemes like Oddbox that use that grade 2 produce that's been upgraded, but that still isn't stemming the tide of massive amounts of grade 2 and grade 3 stuff that doesn't get used. So that can mean, you know, in a commercial orchard, a team could sweep through and be picking with size rings, which would indicate to the pickers whether an apple would be too big or too small. And they'll be doing that really, really quickly. So there's been occasion we've walked, you know, after a commercial team has been through and harvested, we've walked through the orchard and there's just been so many apples there that you wouldn't believe. And it really doesn't actually feel like they've already been picked, but they would have been graded by these commercial teams that are working really quickly and very impressively. But they would have been discriminating based on the size and the cosmetic standards that the specifications that the grower will have received from their buyer. Something that's been an issue throughout the time I've been a Gleaning coordinator in Sussex is farms having sufficient numbers of team members. So particularly fruit farms need dozens, if not hundreds, of workers to bring in the harvest. And something that happened, I'm sure, yeah, you'll be familiar with the fact that the euro's worth more versus the pound than it used to be. So for a lot of Eastern European workers, coming to the UK is less attractive than it was, and I think that's been a bit of a turn off for them to come to the UK. So they might be working in other Northern European countries where their end of season pay packet would be better than the UK. But yeah, that labour shortage is something that's been a bit of an issue. What didn't happen this year was the fear of no workers being able to come. There were chartered flights from Bucharest that brought over agricultural workers, and also you were able to take a work in agriculture on top of your furlough pay. So a lot of the small farms had loads of people willing to work, and I spoke to one fruit producer who said, yeah, I need about 30 workers, and by Easter normally I have about 10 of them arranged, and I'm on the phone with employment agencies trying to fill the sort of 20 or 15 vacancies that they still have. And he said he'd had like 60 applications by that time, but just because people were, you know, picking up that messaging around the need for, you know, the NFU ran a really successful information campaign called Pick for Britain, and DEFRA, and the government were plugging that as well. So the labour shortages that were feared because of COVID didn't actually come to be, thankfully. Another cause of food waste on farms is this mismatch between supply and demand. So that could be this particularly happens during the peak of a particular produce, particular fruit or vegetable being in season. So when apples first come into season in August and early September, the price is pretty good because they're earlies, and likewise at the very end, when they've been in storage and there aren't too many English apples available in April and May, the price for those will be high. But there's this period when there's an oversupply and the prices are low, and that can basically de-incentivize farmers from picking. If the farm gate price is very low, it might actually cost them more to harvest than they will sell for it, and that basically relates to market dynamics. And often they'll be on contracts already, but it can be that they don't have sufficient contracts for how much they've grown, or it can be that those contracts don't work out as they hoped they would. And then the other kind of final aspect of why food waste happens is quite a broad one, but it's unexpected events. So that could be heat waves, it could be heavy rain, it could be coronavirus. Yeah, basically things occurring. You know, farming, there's so many variables to do with getting a crop from seed to being delivered and being paid for that crop if you're the grower, and along that kind of long field to delivery chain, things can occur that can lead to waste, and it's obviously not planned in. It's not what they're designed. You know, it's not what they're intending to do. But it does happen. So I guess that hints at kind of arrangements going amiss, or something happening that that damages the crop, and yeah, unexpected things happen. Next slide, please, George. Yeah, so the steps to running a gleaning day. This is infographic from our toolkit, and I'll just briefly run through it because it gives a bit of a picture that of how we operate. So we would find out from a farmer, either through calling them or asking, or sometimes they notify us that there's a surplus crop, and we immediately find out what's the latest date that it would still be ripe and wouldn't be too far gone, and then we try and pencil in a date for a glean. At that point, we check with the beneficiary organisations if they're able to receive it, because obviously there's no point in us taking it any further until we know that we're going to be able to donate the produce. And if that's a yes, which it usually is, then we can then get back to the grower and say, yes, please, let's go with that date. At which point we do a call out to our volunteers. We have a mailing list in Sussex of about 1,100 volunteers, and we also use social media to promote our gleaning events. And that call out would say something along the lines of, next Tuesday, we're going to be at a farm in Hailsham gleaning plums, and we need as many people as possible to help us there. We would love you to sign up. It wouldn't say that at the moment because our COVID risk assessment limits our numbers to 10. But the general gist of our call outs historically has been the more the merrier. So we do that gleaning call out and people sign up via a Google form to come. And then in a couple of days before the gleaning event, we'll send them the details of the farm and the meeting times and everything they need to bring and the information. And we also organise lift shares, which is it's something we can't do at the moment because of COVID, but we carpool and we say, okay, so Pam coming from Seaford can share with someone else who's in New Haven, or geographically kind of clump people together, and that's great for enabling people without cars to travel to the clean as well. And it provides a sort of like conversational space on the journey for people to talk about whatever really, but get to know one another in advance of arriving. And I think that's quite a healthy thing for the group dynamic of the day. So then the gleaning day occurs. It's normally sort of 10 till 4 with a nice lunch break. We always get a good group photo at the end of it around the produce. We keep records of how much we pick, and either we arrange for the beneficiary organisation to collect or we deliver on that same day. It really depends on how remote the farm is, whether, for example, FareShare have a route that goes near that farm. Yeah, either way really. And then really important to say thank you to the amazing volunteers and the generous host farmers. So that's in the form of emails, and then also if the farmer would like to be thanked publicly, then we do that. So yeah, they're the 10 steps to running a gleaning day. Next slide, please, George. Thank you. So these are some of the organisations that we supply, and these are all pictures of glean produce ending up with them. I'm sure you'll be familiar with many of them. They're all Sussex. Oh no, the top right one is the only non-Sussex based organisation. So that's Damien from the Felix Project, which is a London food redistributor, quite similar in their model to FareShare. And when we glean apples in the north of the county, they're very happy to send a van down and take back a van load of apples. And I say they're similar to FareShare in their model. They take donations of surplus food from the food industry and they distribute that to organisations, frontline community organisations that are providing sort of food relief to people in positions of insecurity. So the bottom right photo is FareShare Sussex, who are based in Moulscombe in Brighton, UK Harvester in Chichester, and they're a smaller organisation but working on a similar model to FareShare. The Bevy is a fantastic community-owned pub in Bevendine in East Brighton. That's Baz, who's a fantastic chef who's always happy to make use of any glean produce. And they have a really nice Friday meal where they send a minibus round the community. Obviously, again, not doing this at the moment. It's called Friday Fens, and it's for isolated elderly people that get picked up in a minibus, brought to have lunch at the Bevy, and then dropped off home again afterwards. But the Bevy also has some great social outreach and inclusion work that goes on, as well as being a nice place to have a drink. And then the top photo in the middle is Sarah from the Real Junk Food Project, and that's also in Bevendine, that food distribution hub that they have. The Real Junk Food Project, a fantastic organisation that originated in Leeds and have a sort of franchise model around the country. And it's predominantly community cafes that they run on a pay-as-you-feel basis, so people can enjoy a meal out of surplus for a donation. And the food they get is mostly from the retail level, so they get stuff from supermarkets at back of store. FareShare, it's more at the distribution level, so kind of pallets rather than crates. But it's good within Brighton that we have those, different organisations getting into different ends of the supply chain. And I know FareShare will very rarely struggle to receive very high volumes of produce, and to their credit, the Real Junk Food Project are also very good at distributing a high level of volumes. But they're just slightly different in their scale. FareShare Sussex have had an incredibly busy summer. To their credit, they've really stepped up. They've now got 6 vans. I over 100 volunteers, and I think they distributed in the month of July like 130 tons of produce when they would ordinarily do about 50 tons a month. So they've massively stepped up their game to ensure the community's food sector is well supplied, and I think that would include organisations over in the Havens. So you're probably quite well aware of them. But yeah, they always have to be consulted in advance of the cleaning day, because we don't want to show up and deliver stuff that they're not going to be able to use. But it's particularly nice to deliver to them at the end of the day and know that job done, delivery's done, the food's going to good causes. You know, cleaning wouldn't be possible if we had to do 50 deliveries of, you know, 100 kilos of apples to each organisation, or whatever the quantity is. But we don't really have the capacity to store and then divvy up. It's amazing that there are organisations that can do the distribution, and we can supply them wholesale. Next slide, please, George. Thanks. So I wanted to mention our current funder, which is a European Union agency called Interreg, who are based in Lille. And it's a cross-border project that's covering organisations that are in Belgium and north of France. It's active until 2022. And we were brought into this project at the invitation of Brighton Hove Food Partnership. And they also invited Fair Share Sussex. And the Flavour project, as it's called, is about sharing learning around food waste redistribution or food surplus redistribution. And it's also about providing training to people who have been long-term unemployed within working in the food sector. So there's two key areas of work. One is just the straight up rescuing of surplus and redistributing it. And then what we're also doing is setting up a pilot processing operation where we're going to use the most reliable bits of surplus produce, which comes on a sort of seasonal cycle. So the allotmenters here will know that it's very hard to give away courgettes and marrows in August. And we know that in November, there's always an oversupply of squash and pumpkins. And we know that the organisations that we supply struggle to get through those particular seasonal surpluses, those very reliable oversupplied bits of produce. So our pilot, a processing pilot, is going to be developing a recipe to preserve initially squash. So we're going to work on a recipe for squash gnocchi, mixing it with surplus potatoes to make a sort of ready meal in a pack. And we're also going to do some soups. So that's what we're going to start off with, focusing on squash, and then also develop some courgette recipes and some apple recipes for the other times of the year. That's that for that slide. Thanks, George. Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit about what we've been doing this summer, which has been a very unusual one for us as much as everyone else. Our risk assessment didn't allow for gleaning to take place for much of the early part of the summer due to the potential high risk of someone coming along and the infection being transmitted. So we started an offer in East Brighton in Craven Vale, which we called the VALE Kitchen. It was a weekly meal for residents to collect, and we did some deliveries to community organisations in the area. So we were averaging about 100 meals every Friday, working with another community food organisation called Soul Food, who have an excellent chef called Ingrid. So her and I were sort of running this kitchen in East Brighton. We're actually going to do two more. We decided to run till the end of September because it's been very popular. It feels less of an emergency food provision than it did. It did feel quite urgent when we started doing it during the lockdown. And I'm pleased to say that the vibe has relaxed a little bit. We are still wearing masks indoors, but it's not as obviously we're all aware things have relaxed somewhat since the early summer. But yeah, the VALE Kitchen has been something that's kind of been something we've provided to the community. We would like to have done something that was more engaging, more participatory, as it was. This felt like the best use of our time, given the restrictions. We were supplied by farms that had surplus, but actually the farm level surplus during lockdown was quite low. Fortunately, a lot of the high demand on local produce was such that farms weren't really finding that they had loads of produce that they wouldn't be able to sell. We were being supplied by fair share for this, and then we did receive a bit of surplus from local farms. And the next slide is a picture of a couple of awesome volunteers. We were always a team of four. So this is Issam on the left, who's a brilliant chef, and Abby, who's also a fantastic chef. So over the past 20 weeks, we made over 1,800 meals for the community, and that's a soup and a main course. And yeah, I've mentioned some of this, that we work with Soul Food, and we use sort of local community organisations that we've partnered with before, and I've sort of had contacts with who were within a few hundred meters of where we were cooking, so we could have some residents come and collect meals, and quite a large bulk of the 100 or so meals we were cooking each week would go in crates to those organisations that could then supply their members. We also struck up about midway, maybe late June, we got to know the guys at Whitehawk Community Food Project, who were fantastic at collecting our compost and also delivering us with fresh produce. So we've been cooking with some of the community allotment produce, which is fantastic. Next slide, please. Yes, I wanted to talk a little bit about the future. There's going to be lots more gleaning, and anyone who would be up for coming is very welcome. We do have a restriction on numbers at the moment, so the places are getting, on our current glean days, they are getting snapped up quite quickly, but it seems sensible at the moment not to relax things too much, so we're capping numbers at 10 and keeping restrictions on people only travelling in cars with members of their own households. But there is a link I could put in the chat for you to enter your email address, and then you'd be notified when a gleaning day has been confirmed. We're also, as mentioned, establishing this processing pilot next month, coming around soon. We have kitchen space on the Bristol estate in East Brighton. We did think about using the Craven Vale kitchen for processing, but it's not quite up to spec for what we need. But there is a community space that's been offered to us, which is larger, and we're going to be starting off using that space. Depending on the success of the pilot, we might end up taking on our own premises, but that's a bridge to cross when we come to it. And in reference to the Flavour project funded by Interreg 2Cs, we're going to be running a training course for people who have been out of work for 6 months or more, and that's geared towards food and sustainability. So it's going to be geared for them to have some time outdoors doing gleaning, or if there isn't a glean scheduled, going to community gardens and doing harvesting or growing work, and also kitchen skills. So they would get some culinary and kind of applied kitchen skills, and a food hygiene certificate, and some technical food stuff as well. So that's something that we're working on and developing, and it's a new area for us, so it feels like there's a huge amount to learn in terms of engaging with that demographic, and also ensuring that our offer is something that's genuinely something that will help those individuals that might be interested in it. So yeah, that's where my focus is at the moment. And I think that's the end of the presentation, actually. So thanks so much for listening exceptionally politely, and I hope it was enjoyable from your point of view to hear some of that. And I'd be really interested to hear any reflections, or if anyone wanted to ask any questions. Maybe it's good to pop back into gallery view. Thanks, George. And if you care to, you're very welcome to ask any questions.
So normally at this point, Phil, you'd have a very big round of applause, but unfortunately,
Off mute and giving it.
Yeah, everyone off mute. Come on.
no, that's brilliant. Thank you for all that information. That was
Just kill Zoom.
fantastic. Especially the future. I think some of us will be signing up for gleaning.
Great. Let me get that link for you.
Yeah, as you say, it's not for everybody, but I think we should all at least give it a go, just to make sure that we don't like it. So has anyone got any questions for Phil?
I do.
Go for it, Karen.
What I've noticed when I've sent your stuff out, which I do, as you know, a lot of it isn't that local to the Havens, and some of the feedback I've had from members of the community, they would love to get involved. And is there a reason for that? Is it because our farmers are mainly grazers and there isn't that much agriculture around in terms of food growing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So gleaning specifically for horticulture, and sorry, my baby's just woken up. 1 second. Babe?
He's got a 9-month little
I think
girl.
that can be forgiven.
How cute is that?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Maybe you might want to mute him, George.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Go.
Can you
Hello,
hear me?
Paula.
Yes, hello, George. Yeah, I was just, while I was waiting for Phil to come back, to say that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much. At the Havens Community Hub, we've actually picked up on the fair share side where there's leftover produce at the end of the day in supermarkets, and during lockdown that wasn't being collected by the organisations that would normally do that. So we've been actually collecting from the Havens organisations and distributing. It got very big very quickly, and at the moment we're distributing around 2.5 tons of otherwise chuckable food. George, who's running this for us today, he's come down and helped us sort things out at the office before, and that seems to be going very well. So I really appreciate, you know, what you guys are doing sort of on the edge areas of the Havens as well, and found it very interesting. Where you've got the Real Junk Food project, they're actually buying things in a few days before its sell-by date from the supermarkets. Is that right? Is that what I missed? Oh, he's gone.
He's currently away at the moment.
Sorry, I missed the beginning of his speech, but the projects he's involved with are gleaning from farms,
Yeah.
but then they actually give it to people who are handing it out in the community like we are. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when he comes back, I'll ask him if he you know, they would consider coming and handing it out at the Havens Community Hub, because obviously we are at the moment the only Havens-based surplus recycling project, and we're doing really, really well. If anybody wants to find out what we're doing, do give me a shout down at the hub, and I'll tell you what we're up to. One of the great things that's just come about, and George knows that I do this, so we get the food, we distribute it from the hub, which is in Denton, and we take it out to families that are requiring help at the moment. And then what we do afterwards, the next day, is we put stuff that's still suitable out for other people to take, so it's not wasted. And then we take it to local farms to give to their animals, if it's bread, for example. And yesterday we received, in return for giving bread to a local farm, 60 brand new fresh eggs, literally just laid from the farm that we're giving the leftover bread to, which I then put outside the hub, and they all went very quickly this morning. So you've got a nice sort of circle of life going on. We give the chickens bread, they give us the eggs, we put them back outside the hub. So, you know,
circular economy.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's the one.
So we're just waiting for Phil to come back.
It might be worth Paula doing maybe a talk at some point at Greenhavens?
Yeah, I can tell you what we're doing at the hub with the leftovers. And also, we were contacted by the local food banks while we're waiting for Phil. If anybody hasn't seen it, we were contacted by the food banks to say they're really low on toiletries. Now, that's, I know, something that people don't think about food banks. You're thinking of food, but actually people who are in food poverty or food insecurity, there are other needs they have, you know, there are other basic living needs they need, and they are asked all the time, as well as the sort of the pasta and the dried food and the tins of stuff, can people have shower gel, shampoo, you know, toothbrushes, that kind of thing. And you don't really think of those things going out from food banks, but they do, and they're very low on stock at the moment. So for September, we've asked people to drop into the hub any toothbrushes, toothpaste, pick something up, and, you know, with your shopping, and you can pop it into us. And we're hoping to give a lot of stuff to the food banks at the end of soapy September to go out with their food too, so people can. Why did it say dirty on my screen when I'm talking about clean things, George? Don't get dirty, and there's me saying about shower gel, for goodness sake. What do you like? But George is also very kindly, because we've had bags and bags of stuff handed in already, George has kindly offered to come down and sort it for me, so thank you, George.
Stop blowing hot air.
Really
well done.
Of you.
Well done, team.
Well done, George.
Phil's back now. So, Karen,
Phil.
I think Karen, you were in the middle of asking Phil a question. About
Yeah, I can
locality.
respond to Karen's question. It does involve quite a bit of travel, getting to farms across the county. The reason there aren't too many gleans in the Havens region is, there's not too much horticulture there. I think the soil of the downs doesn't lend itself that well to horticulture. Probably the nearest farms that we visit are in Barkham and Isfield. Is that within your region?
Yeah, you're muted, Karen.
Yeah, Barkham is. I don't even know where the last place you just said is. What did you?
Isfield?
No, that probably isn't, because that's quite far north of Lewis.
Right.
You could
It's a bit
probably
further
confirm.
than.
Between Lewis and Upfield, Karen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the majority of farms are either the sort of Kent-Sussex border and the sort of Wadhurst, Ticehurst area where there's a lot of fruit production, and then also in the west, so sort of around Chichester, there's a lot of more industrial production, and they've got quite high volumes of surplus. So it does often involve a bit of a journey actually to get to the farm. It can be upwards of a little over an hour to each way to get there. Which I do get that is a bit of a inhibitive journey for some people, particularly if you've got care commitments or you just got volunteer opportunities that don't involve that journey.
Thank you.
Right, thanks, Phil. Paula, did you want to ask Phil a question, or you're muted?
You're muted, Paula.
Yeah, no, it was just to really say, when you're dealing with things like the Real Junk Food Project and they're dealing with fair share, I've noticed that they have produce that has a few days on it, whereas what I'm doing is picking up the end of the day stuff, which is going to be otherwise tipped. Do you know, do those organisations, do they pay for that produce, or how does that work?
No, I don't. I mean, do you mean how does subscription to FareShare work?
Yeah,
is that sort of your question?
Well, the part of FareShare that we're with is only literally end of the day stuff that is going in their skip that night, so we get it free of charge. But the things like the Real Junk Food Project, and then you see the pictures of the vans going out from FareShare that have a lot, literally trays and trays of vegetables on them going out to places. But somebody told me that those places have to pay for that produce, not full price, but
I think Pam might have I could give you a gist of it, but I think Pam probably knows better as a.
I'm actually a user of FareShare. So our project has a weekly delivery from them, and we also collect direct from the supermarkets. Collecting from the supermarkets is free, but if you have a delivery, it's a payment every week.
Right.
is
But it's
paid
not
by.
full price though, I
Yeah.
assume.
Yeah.
It does. I don't think it would match the value of the food.
Oh no,
It's,
no
yeah,
way.
it's
I
to
can't
try and
agree
help
with
Fair
that
Share
point.
cover
Yeah.
their costs.
Thank you. Cool. Anyone else got any questions?
In which case, also go on, Keith.
Keith's got his hand up over there. You're muted, Keith.
What happens to your funding when with Brexit?
Yeah, so the funding we receive is European Regional Development Funding, and that's 60% of our costs until September 22. So within the charity sector, I guess we're used to reasonably short project delivery schedules. So that's actually quite a long one for us. So we would, you know, Gleaning has had various bits of trusts and foundations support us, and as mentioned, lottery and RAP over the last few years. So we would be putting in more bids for that sort of funding, I would anticipate. I mean, the sort of vision for the processing pilot is that we might, you know, capture some fantastic recipes and products that could be a bit more entrepreneurial, but I wouldn't want to bank on us having a commercial self-funded organization, with that not really being the focus of what we do.
Yeah, thanks.
Just one more, Phil, and thank you. It was a really, really, really good presentation. My interest is more about the community growing, and then how we utilise that the food as a community. So not just community growing spaces, but also their gardens, and supporting them and helping them. And is that something your organisation could support Greenhavens Network with? We're looking at the whole corridor across Telscombe to Seaford, and I think food is very much part of life, and that, and particularly with COVID. And I worry that Fair Share, although brilliant, it's actually only targeted at a specific audience. And I feel that there are many, many people struggling these days that don't know how to access fresh food, and aren't aware that there's an opportunity there for free food. And people like Paula are doing some amazing work, but this is still only a very small sector of the community that might actually know that there's something there for them to eat.
Yeah, we would be interested in supporting community growing. I'd say that it's something I've got some experience in from my other work, but feedback hasn't delved into community growing gardens, though we do actually work in we're based out of the same office as something called the Orchard Project, which you might be familiar with, which is a really great charity helping set up community orchards. Yeah, so I'd say it's not necessarily feedback's expertise, that sort of thing, but I'd be very happy to have a conversation about it. And I'm aware of farmers in Arlington at the Ecological Land Co-op site who are very keen. There's community supported agriculture projects, two farms there that are keen to look for kind of footholds in community work. So it might be a question of seeing if they're interested in being involved with some community growing projects in the Havens, because they're, you know, professional horticulturalists as well, so they'd have good technical skills, and also have, you know, polytunnels full of plants that sometimes they might not be able to plant out in their own fields. So that's always a nice thing when you've got a commercial farm that can send extra plants to community projects. That always tends to go down well.
What I love about what you guys do, and I think you're quite unique nationally, apart from your subject matter, but is that you're doing micro volunteering. So which I think would suit Greenhavens very well. You're actually able to galvanise people, and they don't know when they're next going to volunteer. They can dip in, they can dip out. They might not even come with you for 3 months, might they? And I think that's such a good model these days when people are so busy. So supporting how you might be able to nurture us in enabling us to do something like that would be great. Thank you.
Great. My baby is teething, and my partner's out this evening, so I think I need to jump off and be dad for a bit. But it's been great to see all you guys on here, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Phil. Leslie's just joining us. Her Zoom crashed, so I'm sure she'll. Phil's just leaving us, Leslie.
Yeah, no, that's no worries. I just left everybody. Yeah, so thanks again, Phil, for very good presentation, and hopefully we'll see you at a network meeting in the future. Maybe that'd be really good. Let us know how you get on.
All right. Thanks very much, guys.
Phil.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Right.
Great. That was very good. Sorry about that momentary loss of chair. Yeah.
Fighting behind the scenes just to get you back in.
Where's the password?
Welcome to Zoom. You don't get this in real meetings, do you?
No, definitely
Objective
not.
from the call.
Not unless I'm stuck in the loo or something.
Oh, too much. Thanks, Leslie.
Right.
Right.
So I don't think there's anything else, is there, Karen? I can't remember what was on the agenda. It's all gone. You're on mute. Oh, no, you're not.
Yeah. Well, we've gone on a lot longer. We were going to take a break and just discuss our new project, but I think we could wait to do that anyway, and do that via social media, and that is no one's had a break for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So I will just say thank you so much for all coming.
Yeah.
It's been lovely to see you all, and it's brilliant to have new faces. Please stay in touch with us.
Most definitely.
Archie says hello.
Yeah, Archie says hello. Sorry, everyone. The back door's open. Yeah, so if anyone's got anything they want to ask very quickly before we shut down.
No.
No.
Thank you. Good
You're
night.
welcome.
Good
You're
night.
welcome. Yeah.
Thanks
good night.
very
much.
Really
interesting. Thanks so much for coming.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So we don't do
Bye.
this in real meetings either, do we? The waving
You could
stuff.
do. Could be the new thing.
Bye, guys. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Cheers, George.
See you soon.